today's episode of Low Tech Garage. I'm Josh, and we are taking our third attempt at getting the idle fixed on this thing. Now, if this is your first time tuning in, you probably won't recognize this car, but we have been chasing a high idle issue on our 1996 Jaguar XJS, which is a straight six, and basically just, tried some common things on it and not had much luck so far. But a very, very kind user, who we hope is a subscriber now, took the time to comment and let us know about a possible fix that we didn't notice the last couple of times. And of course, if you are new to the channel and you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, definitely consider doing that because we have a lot more projects coming on this great XJS here. We would obviously love to have you, and every subscriber helps us grow the channel. So thank you very much for considering. Now let's jump into it. Now, as you can see, we already have the car most of the way apart. Very straightforward to get to this point. Basically, you just have a little C-clip and pin to remove to separate this guy off of the throttle body. You've got your throttle cable, which comes out just like a standard one. You've got two plugs, one on the top and one on the bottom to unplug. And we have left the coolant hoses connected. We're going to try and do this in situ so that we don't have a giant coolant explosion happen by disconnecting those. Worst case, we will, and we'll put it on the bench, but we're hoping we don't have to. So as you can see, we have the throttle body off of the vehicle. Now, the previous fixes that we attempted were, first off, cleaning the idle air controller. That was one that gave us some hope, actually. When we very first tried that, the next drive afterwards, the car initially had a lower idle, drove more normally, but honestly, after driving it for a very short period, it went right back to what it was doing, which is very frustrating. Next, I used some leaps of logic and noticed that our temperature gauge wasn't reading properly. It hadn't been ever since we got the car. And it made me wonder if potentially the car was thinking that it was cold all the time and therefore was putting it into a high idle. So we did put a temperature sensor in it. We've now driven it around since. The temperature gauge works a lot better. We also put a new thermostat in. So those things are better, however, did not fix the high idle. But the champion in question who left that comment pointed us to this little guy right here. So this is on the front edge of the throttle body, because this sits on the driver's side of the car. So on the front edge of the throttle body, you see this little guy right here? That little screw sets where your butterfly closes. And I'll do my best to show you. You see how it pokes through like that? That is your throttle stop. So basically, by backing that screw out, we should be able to, hopefully, lower our idle. Now, of course, the very first thing we tried was putting an Allen wrench in there and really trying to just back it out. It wasn't very confidence-inspiring, so we've decided to separate the throttle body off to get better access, and we've discovered that you may have noticed ours is slightly broken. It's like someone's done this before. Our theory is that the car perhaps had some sort of issue where it was not idling properly, and they raised the idle using that screw and potentially even used some thread sealant or something to hold that in place. So our idea is that now we have better access. Hopefully we can remove that and put a different kind of like bolt in there that gives a little bit more of a positive grip when we go to adjust it, and then maybe more of like a lock nut rather than having to use a sealant. And of course, if you are desperate to know how to get to this point, you can just check back to one of our previous videos that shows this process more in depth, but we decided to skip all the way ahead to this part so we can get to the good stuff, which is us trying to get that little grub screw backed out. So now we're gonna get to it. All right, so general consensus so far, not good. Whoever has broken this thing before us, it is not only in there, but it's also split. And one of our creative ideas was maybe seeing if we could grab the inside here with some vice grips or something, but it looks like they've already tried that. The threads are already a bit mangled. So we're maybe gonna take a stab at drilling this thing out. I think that's probably our only option at this point. So guess how well that went? Not very well. As you can see, we've just threaded a couple bolts into these lines for now just to stop the coolant from all pouring out. We had hoped that it would work in the car, but all the drill bits we have here are blunt. So in my workshop back home, I have some fresh, sharp ones. I'll set up the throttle body there and drill that out myself. But for now, we have it out of the car and ready to go, so we're gonna bring it home with us. All right, we are back at my house where I have a bench vise, a drill, and some fresh drill bits. So we should be able to tackle this throttle body a little easier here. So I'm going to clear off a workspace here because my workshop is notorious for having a huge workbench with no space. I'm going to do that now. We'll get this thing set up and hopefully have an easier time drilling this thing out. And look at this beautiful workspace. It's like it was always there. Now I've got this in my bench vise here, and you might be wondering what I'm doing with this light shining in here. But if you've ever worked with a butterfly, throttle body or carburetor before, and you're trying to get it to seal, light is a great way to tell how far open it is. So let me show you what we're working with here. And it's quite interesting. That actually looks pretty good. I mean, I think we could get it to close just a little more. And we are still going to follow through and drill this out because honestly, it's just not good having a broken thing that is clearly designed as an adjuster. So we're going to basically drill this out, tap some new threads, and put an easier to access type of bolt in here. I have some that actually have like a little hex head, and we'll do a little jam nut as well. So that'll make it a lot easier to adjust. However, I am thinking that's a very minor adjustment. So I took another look, and if you see this little guy right here, this is where our electric idle air controller is. I noticed that. Now, I'm not 100% sure how those are supposed to operate, but I mean, in my mind, that basically should be fully sealed when it's not receiving power, and then perhaps, it retracts back to allow air in. I may be wrong, so I'll do some research. Maybe when, power gets applied, that actually closes, but it was a surprise to see that is, quite open. So we're going to do some research and see what the deal is. We did look at trying to put this on the drill press, but honestly, the amount of time it would take to create the rigging and everything for this and figure out how to get this dead level and dead flat would be absolutely ridiculous because this is not a convenient flat block. So we're going to be using the hand drill, just going slow and steady and making sure we get as dead straight as we possibly can. And as with any drilling, slow and steady is better than just ripping into it if you're dealing with, harder metals. So we're just going to let the drill bit do the work. You can already see material starting to come out here. So by my estimation, we are about halfway, if you can kind of imagine that. And again, I'm going very slow and steady. I keep re-oiling using the, we're just using some WD-40, and I'm just regularly wiping off the excess. My goal is just not to immediately blunt my brand new drill bit. So taking my time, going slow, making sure it's well oiled, and clearing out the debris regularly. And it seems to be doing the trick nicely. All right, and we have success. So basically, we are now nice and drilled out. We've removed all of the old bolt that was in there and landed in a pretty good spot as well. And a very exciting outcome. You can see we are significantly better when it comes to the amount of light showing around that butterfly. So actually, that is a good sign that it may have been letting too much air around, which obviously will cause a higher idle. So I guess I thought I had my tap and die set here, but it is actually back at the main workshop. So we're going to take this back there, and we're going to tap some new threads into this and put a new piece of hardware in there because even though this seals perfectly, it does stick a little, and obviously that's not something you want. So we're going to set it to where it closes exactly that far, but just not quite far enough to stick. All right, and after our success drilling out the old hardware on the throttle body, we're back at the shop. So next step, we're going to be tapping new threads into that and setting a new bolt as our idle adjust screw. So I'm going to go over to the workbench, and we're going to start on that process. All right, so coming over here to the workbench, we have everything set up. As you can see, we've got the hole that we drilled out, so that is basically ready to rock. Got our tap and die set ready, and we've got our stainless hardware here. So instead of doing a kind of like a set screw style like we had before, we're going to use something that has a hex head like this, a little easier to work with. You can just get a wrench in there, a lot more positive connection, a lot less likely to break like the previous one did. So this will be exciting. And I know I've mentioned this before, but if you are working on cars more than just a little bit, consider investing in a tap and die set. This one from Amazon has been fantastic. It has paid for itself time and time again already. We'll include an Amazon link to this exact product, but I can vouch for this specifically. I mean, we've used this dozens and dozens of times, and it has been such a lifesaver. So we're going to move on to checking the threads on these, picking an appropriate size for this hole, comparing this to make sure we're using the right type of tap, and then we'll start tapping the hole. So we are all set up to go here. So first off, we have our smallest piece of hardware that we're going to try and set. It looks like this one will do it. This is an M4. So we're going to start with this. I already have the tap set up in our little tap handle here. Just in case, we do have an M5 that we could always step up to as well. But that's my backup plan. My hope is that we'll be able to work with this M4. So I'm going to clean out the hole that we drilled with a little bit of parts cleaner because there's probably still just a little bit of debris in there. And once we've got that cleaned out and wiped down with a rag, we're then going to oil it with a little WD-40 and start the slow and steady process of tapping our hole. Whoop. Well, you can see definitely was some debris in there that we just blew out, so that's good. All right, so I'm going to do my best to let you guys see what we're doing here, but we're going to start, now that we've cleaned that hole out, with just a little bit of WD here as lubrication. I've always found it's worked perfectly fine for me, and we are working with aluminum, so it's a softer metal here. And then basically, we are going to start with our tap. Now, the method that I've always found that works pretty well is kind of just ever so light pressure to begin with, just to let it find purchase initially. And usually after the first turn or so, it'll kind of find its direction. And I'll usually go, 1.5, 2 turns forward, and then half a turn back, and just continually work, that process until, and each one you'll feel it biting and biting and biting. But the little half turn back method has really helped me. It just lets the threads clear a little bit. And there are times where I will actually back the tool the whole way out as well and reapply some oil. So it's biting there, and then just back it up ever so slightly. So actually it may even be closer to 1 turn forward, half a turn back. But yeah, slow and steady is always the method with these. You don't want to go too fast, because the last thing you want is to strip these threads that you're creating out, and then you have to move up to the next size. So I'm probably almost to the point where I want to add a little more oil here, but you guys are starting to see the process, and hopefully you can see the tool is starting to bite in. We're not quite through yet, but it's definitely doing the job. Now for you guys, this was just moments, but for us, this was nearly an hour. Just being real, I was going extremely slow and steady. I think our tap went in ever so slightly at an angle compared to the hole. Not an impossible situation, you just have to be careful, but we are the whole way through. As you can see, the tap is actually pushing on the tab here that moves the butterfly. So I'm gonna back this back out, we're gonna clean out the threads, and we are ready to rock. All we gotta do then is clean down this surface here and do the one on the car as well. Then we're gonna set our bolt in while it's here on the bench, just so we can really check this butterfly, make sure it looks like it's good, well sealed, but not sticking. And once we do that, we'll put it in the car and give it a test. James is over there cleaning the throttle body. I've tapped him in just to get him working on cleaning off some of the old sealant and also some of the carbon and stuff that's in there, just getting it nice and pristine. While he is doing that, since I don't want to be completely lazy, I'm going to come here on the car and basically just clean that mating surface down there. So we're kind of tag teaming this. And it is all clean and looking beautiful. And we have our new bolt in there and this little nut right here, we can use that basically as a jam nut. So once we get this set where we're happy with it, if we know the car's behaving, we can then take this nut and jam it up against that surface there, and that will lock this in place so it doesn't back out. Time to get this thing on the car. All right, so predictably we have connected the little heater hoses that go through the throttle body back up. The hose clamps are put back on. We do have a thin film of sealant around the base of the throttle body there. Just to be safe, make sure that seals nicely. And we have the top 2 bolts in, so we just got to put these bottom 2. And then once those are started, that'll let us slide the throttle body square and flat up against the mating surface there, so we make sure we're not slipping around with the sealant too much. So that's what we're going to do, and then we'll get this thing tightened down and we can start reconnecting the 2 electrical connections and the throttle cable and the cruise control setup. All right, so throttle body is bolted down nicely with sealant. We have, again, this is important to make sure you get this set up this way, so your throttle cable comes around here. When you're bolting the throttle body down, make sure this arm here is on this side of your EGR valve. Otherwise, you'll end up having to take it off and put it back on like we just did. Then you've got your cruise control guy right here, comes up through there. Plug up top, plug on the bottom. We've also put the elbow back in and done up our hose clamps here. So all that's left is the plug right here for our, I guess I don't even know what that is, airflow? Air temp sensor, okay. And then this little guy right here and that hose clamp. So I'm gonna knock those out now and we should be good to go. Do our first start here and we're gonna see what it does. We've set it where the butterfly is slightly open like it used to be. So, you know, we'll just gauge from there and then see if we can maybe drop the idle if it's still high. All right, so she's most of the way up to temperature. It's not the home run we had hoped for, but it is a significant improvement. Right about 900 RPM here, which is a lot better than the 1100 we were experiencing before. So definitely interested to take this for a test drive and see how she acts, you know, in driving scenarios. So we are out on its initial test drive. And, you know, it does seem like an improvement. Again, not the home run we were hoping for so far. We were really thinking, man, maybe this will knock it all the way out. But the lower RPM does seem to diminish the runaway that it used to have, where you'd let off the brake and it would want to accelerate. It doesn't seem like there's so much of that. And it is cruising very nicely. So we're going to get to the other side of the bridge here, turn back around, and just try it in a couple other scenarios and just see what we gained. And now would be a great time to remind you, if you haven't hit that like button yet, please hit that like button. It really helps people let you know this is good content, shows it to other people who may benefit from seeing this video. Of course, we are still on that mission to get this thing as dialed in as possible. So all my fellow XJS people, or just Jag fans in general, please hit that like button and let other people know you're enjoying this, from me and James. And then basically, if you're really enjoying it, or you like a lot of our other content, or have even just seen a few of our videos and want to see more, hit that subscribe button. We really appreciate it. Okay, so wrapping up, here is our conclusion of what we found. That did actually make a big improvement. Mostly what we're finding is the in-park idle, so when the car is in park, is still a little high. It's basically running somewhere between 900 and 1,000 at all times. That is an improvement, but it's not perfect. We want it to be in park at about 750, somewhere in that realm. But in drive is where the huge difference is. It is now basically acting like a normal car, and that is a massive, massive drivability improvement. So the issues it used to have before in drive, if you were just sitting still and you lifted your foot off the brake, it would kind of rocket off on its own, even if you weren't touching the throttle. It would even upshift on its own. So you could literally, not touching the throttle, accelerate up to like 50 miles an hour. Not quickly, but it would get there. Now, doesn't do that at all. Will not upshift. It pulls away normally, which is amazing. And the other big thing, basically engine braking was non-existent on it before, especially at speeds up to like 50, 55 miles an hour. You could let off the throttle and it would just maintain. It was like having cruise control on, and you literally had to use the brakes to slow down. Now it engine brakes normally. It will actually back down off of speed at a normal rate. So that is, again, a massive win. We tweaked a couple other little things. There's a little slack in the throttle cable. Seems counterintuitive, I know, but we dialed it in very carefully to make sure there was no tension on it. It was just right there so that the throttle's a little more responsive. But in general, big win. We were hoping for it to be one and done, but at least very, very close now. So the question comes, what is next? Well, there is basically the idle air controller itself. Basically, it's a little kind of stepper motor thing with a plunger in it, and I think we called that out earlier as we were cleaning the throttle body. We're thinking it might be time to just try one. It could be wasted money, but they're not wildly expensive. We're going to do some research, find a good one, and we are probably going to, at this point, order one and put it in. If we continue to get incremental improvements, we could get there. You know, it may be more than one issue that we're chasing, and that's why it's been so challenging. So the next round is probably going to be bolting in one of those steppers. Very straightforward. It's literally the two pieces of hardware and the plug, but we will give you guys an update and let you know if that gets us the rest of the way there, or if it's basically the same and that stepper was good. So for now, we are wrapped up. Greatly appreciate it. And as always, from Low Tech Garage, we appreciate you watching. Hit that like button if you haven't already. Please do. It really helps us. And of course, if you like the channel, please subscribe. So catch you on the next one. Hopefully we get this Jag dialed in very soon.